Hi, welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name is Adam Hanlon. I'm the editor of Wetpixel, and I'd like to thank Icolite for sponsoring this episode. Icolite have a long pedigree of supplying products for underwater photographers, and long may they continue, and we'd like to thank them very much for sponsoring this episode. I'd also like to introduce you to Alex Mustard, our regular contributor. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Adam. I have to start with an apology. If you hear any loud booming sounds overhead, it's not jets going through the sound barrier. It's a 4-year-old doing an impression of a heffalump in the room above my head. So.
Oh, you're not wearing a helmet then, Alex, just in case.
No,
Just in case the ceiling
it
drops
sounds
on your
a
head.
lot worse than it is, I'm sure.
Good. So today's episode, we thought we'd talk about, well, I thought I'd ask Alex actually, how to build a career as an underwater photographer. Over to you.
Oh, thanks. It's it's a question without a simple answer,
Yeah.
and the reason for that is there is no set career path, and I think that although I'm going to try and divide this into sort of 4 or 5 categories, where the way underwater photographers that I can think of have managed their careers and allowed them to do underwater photography as their main occupation, or indeed just be a money earning, enjoyable part occupation. I think that even with these categories, there's no photographer that fits completely neatly into any one of them. So I think the key message is everyone is kind of finding their own way, and if they want to be successful, they're probably changing and adapting all the time as the market and the opportunities change. So I think that's where I'd start. I think probably the purest, what people imagine, being an underwater photographer would be like if they're already underwater photographers doing it a career, is kind of probably the National Geographic model where, you become a real star of underwater photography, and you get to know staff at National Geographic, and you pitch them story ideas that you've researched, you've thought about, and until one of those gets funded, and then that funding gives you the opportunity to spend time in the field to shoot towards that story. And in that situation, you are just in the field taking pictures for this one assignment. And I think that and you maybe are going to the places that you've dreamed of to do that. And after that, you're selling the pictures to the magazine, getting well paid for those. Those pictures are going into stock library like National Geographic Creative, and those pictures are then earning you money longer term. And the sums involved are usually enough for people then, if they're into that chain and they're on to the next story, that then becomes their main occupation. Yeah. It is not as simple as that, and I don't think any of the photographers who are currently in that bracket are just doing that. They're also looking for other opportunities, but working with a big brand like that is probably the most being employed by an employer way of having the underwater photography life that people dream of. So I'd say that... Sorry, Adam.
I think National Geographic is also National Geographic of now is a very different animal to National Geographic of 5-6 years ago, and certainly now it's a lot more corporate. And the days of them pitching an idea and then disappearing for 2 years and then coming back with some pictures, that's not the case anymore. It's not like that anymore.
And first class travel and
all the rest. That's not the case anymore. So times have changed, but I think it's a good model. It's a good example of a type of professional kind of category. Yeah.
I think, one of the big changes that I've seen that I don't think we discuss enough, and this is very much a stills photography conversation, is I think that the budgets of natural history filmmaking, particularly with underwater segments, have gone up. That's been a real growth area in underwater imaging. And the most, paid for type work is much more in that area than in stills photography. So I wanted to stick this to stills photography, but I think if you just want to be underwater seeing amazing things, operating a camera, the moving pictures world is actually where that more simple lifestyle can be, if you can, like all these things, if you can get into it. And I think that's, and I know several stills photographers who've moved across because they weren't able to earn a living as stills photographers and have trained themselves up to become, frontline, moving picture people. Right. The next category is kind of the diving magazine type photographer, which, again, 20, 30 years ago could be a very lucrative and very profitable career, but there still remain underwater photographers whose main way of operating is they've probably got another job as well or another income stream as well, but their main way of operating is working with a particular diving publication and going to destinations for that and writing features, and they're able to fund their travel because with the magazine and the regular publishing track record, they're able to do trips for free, paid for by tour operators, resorts, and tourism organisations for countries, taking them to destinations, and then they come back, write, publish the pictures, and that's their way of operating. I'm not really aware of anyone sort of doing that as an entire career anymore, but certainly for a lot of photographers, I can think of, particularly around Europe where there's lots of magazines in a small area, and also in North America, it can be actually how a lot of photographers do nearly their entire photography is on trips that have been funded this way, and then they'll also try and do some other photography once the magazine assignment is done, and also those pictures are theirs to sell beyond the magazine assignment.
I think one of the things, I mean, that unites both the sort of National Geographic model, if we're going to call it that, and the sort of is that in technically these people will probably draw some kind of salary, i.e. there'd be some kind of monthly payment that they would be getting from an individual. Now, in the case of the National Geographic one, that was frequently enough to live on quite comfortably, whereas typically now with particularly the print magazine world, it's harder and harder to get sufficient as a salary. But you would be on some kind of monthly retainer, or basically a paycheck gets deposited in your bank pretty regularly.
Certainly I would say as myself, I've gravitated much more to writing columns for magazines because columns go in every issue, and that gives you that equivalency of having that regular income, because the challenge for photography is the challenge of cash flow and the challenge of total income. So regular. I would say that the number of photographers on salary is tiny. I would say it's much more that people have agreements with magazines to do regular features, and obviously, like any business, the longer you're in it, the more contacts you have, and the more the more material you have long term. So that there are photographers who've got an understanding with the magazine that they'll be in every issue, as opposed to really having a salary. And the same with National Geographic is that, once you're in that fold, you've got the ear of the editors regularly, and you're pitching your next ideas, or you're soft pitching them, working on them, then doing a hard pitch, and then the next one is lined up while you're still working on the current one and the one after that. And so, that's kind of more how people maintain the thing rather than through salary. I would say with National Geographic, obviously the photographers there, the connections with that brand give them other earning opportunities, both commission work, but also things like leading tours for National Geographic, because National Geographic have a big travel arm, giving lectures for National Geographic, because they also, have big speaking things, and those can be very well paid. And also National Geographic Creative are representing those photographers and finding work for them, which will earn money both for the National Geographic brand and the photographers, such as speaking engagements and commercial speaking engagements. So, all these things have their way of working out. Right. The next category I want to get onto is the dive shop liveaboard photo pro photographer, which is often, I think, not considered by people who get into underwater photography as a hobby. But actually, these are some of the people who work full-time as underwater photographers, get to dive the most, get to do great diving, aren't asked to do the things that no one else wants to do, and certainly are able to earn enough money, often have a salary from the liveaboard or the dive shop, or alternatively have the ability to earn money through the year through selling, the products that they sell, which are trip videos, trip photos, and are able to shoot their own stock. And with the way the internet is these days, those people can also be regularly contributing images like any other photography pro around the world. So they can be in a very, very good position, particularly if they get themselves established. And I'm surprised that more serious shooters don't go down that route. I mean, there are around the world, particularly some of the big resorts in Indonesia or something like that, or in the Philippines, in-house photo pros who are there to teach, who are there to, help, guests as well. But I think it's a really interesting career move, and I'm surprised more people don't follow it.
When I was in Australia, on the Barrier Reef 2 years ago, and it's quite interesting there. Where obviously you've got these very big boats going out to the Barrier Reef with often a few hundred divers on board, and they have photographers that go out with the boats, and in fact, I met Stuart Ireland, and that's his business, is supplying photographers who go out on these boats, and they're full-time photographers every day, primarily taking pictures of the divers, but again, spending a lot of time in the water, taking a lot of pictures, and that was a sort of area that I hadn't really thought about, because I wasn't, to be honest, I didn't really know it existed on that scale. But he employs, I think last time, 14 or 15 photographers full time, and that's what they do. And they earn a wage, and and they dive in the Barrier Reef all day. Not bad.
And I think that one of the things in that area is you're generally tasked to have both good stills and video capabilities.
Yeah, it's good.
I think the next sort of branch is probably the one that encompasses the most photographers trying to earn some or their entire career, and that's kind of the general freelancer who is working, who's looking for work across all sorts of boundaries. So they will be contributing to magazines. They will be maybe taking on commissions. They will be contributing to stock libraries a lot and trying to earn what they can there as well. And I think the key to all these freelancers is having fingers in lots of pies, so that they're not reliant on any one income stream, because it can be quite precarious, but also by having their images out there. And I think it works very well now in the modern world, because you're not reliant on individual slides that have to be posted around. The stock can be there. You can have automated websites that allow people to download high-res files and send you money when you're even in the field. And within that freelance area, I think there's some interesting avenues that people have explored. In certain parts of the world, fine art galleries and selling prints can be very lucrative and can fund entire underwater photographers' activities. The ones that do it really well, really understand their market and shoot to their market, not just try and sell them their best pictures, but actually shoot the pictures the clients want. I think can do really, really well for financially when they're based in the right part of the world. And the reason I say that is, if you live in a very busy city where everyone has small houses and is nowhere near the sea, you're unlikely to be able to sell lots and lots of massive, great
big prints,
underwater photography prints. People won't see the relevance of them, don't have the space on their walls. If you live in an area where people have second homes, it's warm, it's sunny, it's by the sea, the walls are all painted white, people want to put colour and ocean-related art on those walls, and underwater photographers in those areas can do very well through these gallery sales, particularly if they can be around the gallery themselves and have that personal contact with the clients. That is actually what people want to buy. They want to buy something of someone they feel they've got a connection with, not just a random piece of art. So I think that worked for certain photographers very well.
I think there's a sort of, again, commercial art, so selling art to buildings that are commercial buildings. So Mika sells pictures of mantles of clams, and has done very well. I mean, they're obviously the subject. She shoots them, and businesses buy them and hang them on their walls. And that's not something we probably would consider, but these are the kind of niche markets that people can occupy and can extract an income from. So
I know. I don't remember the name now, but I know there was another photographer that I ran into, I think in Lembe, who specialised in photographing anemone skirts and mouths. And basically, the more suggestive they looked, we won't go into more details than that, the more money they would make as prints, because they could be potentially, something. And she would just travel the world, do her diving, find anemones and photograph bits of them that look like bits of other things. And we'll leave it at that. But another area that underwater photographers can do quite well in, and doesn't involve travel, is baby and children photography, particularly female photographers, because you're often photographing mothers and children in a pool, and those subjects often feel more comfortable around a female photographer. But baby photographers, and there's a number of companies, certainly here in the UK, that specialise it. Most towns have got 2 or 3 people who are working as underwater photographers in the pool, taking baby photos all the time. Some of them do it to incredibly high artistic standards. Some of them do it to a standard that really pleases the customers. But that is an area where underwater photographers can have quite good incomes. And there are big companies that employ people doing that in the UK and have certain demands of equipment and technology. But I think that's really interesting. I'm sure that exists all around the world. Right, and then the final area. Oh, sorry.
No, but Abby Abby was very involved in that. Sorry, I mentioned that. Abby Mullins.
Yeah. And I think it's a great chance to, really get on top of things. And it's quite a challenging type of photography. And, there's, it's very much like being a studio photographer. It's about the interaction with the clients as well as the interaction with the camera. Both above and below the water in terms of making it a good business. Then the final area that underwater photographers have down the years made work for them financially is in the NGO activity. And it sounds a bit strange, but there's no doubt that photographs are a tremendous currency for changing conservation issues and other ocean-related issues. And, a lot of underwater photographers are highly motivated to want to do good things for the ocean. And it's led to underwater photographers forming NGOs, and there have been quite a lot of them down the years. And the way this can work for a photographer is NGOs obviously have different tax statuses to individual photographers. Companies can donate money to them tax-free in certain countries, and people want to support those things. And if the activity of that NGO is basically to create images to raise awareness of environmental issues or amazing aspects of the ocean, it's a way that photographers have funded their activities. So you're basically saying, well, I will make my time underwater all about taking pictures that are going to promote the ocean, promote conservation in the ocean, and you fund me public to do that because I'm a nice guy, I'm a nice girl, and this is a valuable thing to do. And although it sounds a little bit harebrained, it can be very successful for people in terms of allowing them to have a decent income and also to be able to address things that are very satisfying to be trying to address. There may have been the odd example down the years which has been rather exploited by the photographer as a means for them to do what the hell they like. But I would say the vast majority of them are really motivated by wanting to address those big conservation issues, and the best of them have made really positive impacts in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you say. A picture tells 1,000 words, doesn't it? So and putting people in the field, ultimately, it does. There's a cost associated with that. So if you can find a sponsor that's prepared to cover that cost while you capture that images, I mean, that's it's a worthwhile exercise, sure.
Yeah, and just within that category, there are also a few of the bigger conservation NGO organizations who have taken on at various times long-term contracts with photographers. So, paying them some sort of a salary to be a staff photographer. Quite a lot of them, the big marine conservation charities do that, or at least have regular, relationships with photographers who they'll give regular commissions to. So that is another, potential income stream area related to that whole NGO situation. Not a personal NGO of a photographer, but actually, a big existing one, which is putting some of its funds towards photography.
So one area that we haven't talked about, which we probably should mention briefly, is obviously the idea of running workshops, so training for underwater photographers. Obviously, that's another income stream. I think most of the time it fits in the sort of freelance category where people have a number of income streams. They're probably selling stock, selling fine art prints, possibly working in publications and books and magazines, but also would be running trips and workshops. And that they also form an income stream. So I think sort of the freelance is the sort of jack of all trades really, who does a bit of everything. And certainly things like training and workshops certainly form part of the income stream for that.
So, I think there's a few things I'd say about that. Is first of all, the advantage of running workshops is it gives it gives you the ability to choose where you want to go to take photos, and to, at a minimum at least, fund your time in the field for free. So by getting a group together, taking them somewhere, either leading a trip or teaching a workshop, getting a group together and taking them somewhere. Usually most dive resorts around the world will be like, if you bring 10 people, you can have a room for free. And then you and your partner can maybe take that room, or however the deal you're going to work with them is, to a more serious situation where the goal of the trip is teaching. And it's more the way I work, where I may be going back to a destination that I don't really, it's not high on my list anymore because I've been there so many times, but I know I can do a really good teaching event there. The things I would say about teaching is, the moment teaching isn't the focus of your trip, you will very, very quickly run out of people wanting to come on your trip. So I think you have to accept, if you're going down that route, that your own photography becomes a backseat activity. However, you still get to dive a lot. You still take a camera down. You can still take pictures. And I think particularly by going to destinations where you've been a lot before and you don't have any great ambition to photograph everything, you can maybe not take very many photos, but when something that you've been waiting to see happens because you put all those hours in the water, you're then at least in a position to take the pictures. But I think you have to be honest going into it that it's not doesn't give you ultimate freedom. And if you think it does, or you're someone who doesn't enjoy teaching or doesn't have patience with people who are learning something that you already know how to do, you're very quickly going to find that you're going to have empty workshops, and it's not an opportunity for you, because it's very easy to say I'm going to run a workshop. It's another thing persuading people to spend a lot of money to be part of it. And if you're not delivering, they're not going to come back.
Particularly do it twice, yeah. That's the trick, isn't it? Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I think it's an interesting discussion, isn't it? I think it's probably something that we probably will revisit in some form in the future again on another episode of Wetpixel Live, because there's a lot to be said about it, really.
I think one of the main things is everyone kind of does it their own way.
Yeah.
And I think if you try and copy exactly what someone else is going to do, the market's going to turn around and say, well, we've already got someone that can do that. So you need to find, something different to stand out in this market. And any photographer who thinks this is a static conversation will also very quickly find themselves not doing well, because the opportunities are constantly changing. Yeah. And, you don't want to jump on every bandwagon. But at the same time, if you just do the same thing year on year, you're likely to find yourself out of touch after a while.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you very much, Alex. Wonderful as always. And I'd like to thank our sponsor again for this episode, which is Icolite. I'd like to thank you all for watching. And please feel free to add any comments to this or on the Wetpixel forums, or drop us a like if you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you again soon.